Buffalo, we need to talk. Because while you were sleeping, or maybe while you were still replaying that preseason win over the Panthers for the 5th time, the Buffalo Bills front office was quietly making one of the most telling roster moves of the entire summer. No press conference. No dramatic announcement. Just a transaction sheet that dropped on August 17th and instantly rewired the conversation about who's going to be lining up in the backfield for this football team come September. So grab a coffee, grab a buffalo chicken dip if you've got one lying around, because we've got a lot to cover today, and it all starts with a football team that is frankly feeling really good about itself right now. Let's set the scene. Preseason Week 1 is officially in the books, and the Bills didn't just win, they looked sharp doing it. Not sloppy, not disorganized, not the kind of preseason performance where you squint at the screen and try to convince yourself the third-string guys are getting valuable reps. No, this was a football team top to bottom that looked prepared. Bleacher Report even put out an article naming winners from around the league after Week 1, and names like Drew Allen, Fernando Mendoza, Jeremiah Love, and DeGene Scribbling all got shout-outs for strong debuts across the NFL. But buried in that same piece was a quieter, more important storyline: the Buffalo Bills. As an entire organization, were pointed to as one of the most complete performances of the weekend. Not one flashy rookie. Not one highlight reel play. The whole team. If you've watched this franchise for the better part of the last decade, you know that is not something we say lightly. This wasn't just a good night. It might have been one of the sharpest preseason performances Buffalo has put on the field in years. And that's the mood heading into this next chapter of training camp. Media wasn't even allowed access to the team today. It was a walkthrough only, a quiet reset before things ramp back up. Tuesday brings the open practice at Highmark Stadium at 8:30, which, if you're local, is an absolute must-attend. Wednesday, the team packs up and heads to Cleveland for joint practices with the Browns, and Thursday, we finally get to see how Buffalo's guys stack up against outside competition in real practice reps, which, if we're being honest, tells us a lot more than a preseason game full of backups ever could. But none of that is actually the headline today. The headline is what happened on the transaction wire. Because on August 17th, the Buffalo Bills made 2 roster moves that on paper look like minor roster shuffling, depth guys coming and going, the stuff that barely gets a mention on the nightly news ticker. But when you actually sit with these 2 moves side by side, they tell a much bigger story about what this coaching staff is thinking heading into the regular season. Move number 1. The Bills brought back inside linebacker Otis Reese IV. This is a guy who's been around the building all summer, spent most of training camp with the team, got released a few days ago in a roster trim, and now, just days later, he's back. That alone tells you something. Teams don't just recycle guys for fun. If Reese is back in the building, it likely means the staff wants more eyes on him, more extended reps, possibly in these upcoming preseason games, to see if there's a role for him on the 53 or at minimum a practice squad stash. But move number 2 is the one that really matters. The Bills released Jackson Acker. And if that name doesn't ring a bell for casual fans, don't worry. It's not going to be the name anyone's talking about by September. What matters is what his release confirms. Because for weeks now, the fullback position in Buffalo has quietly been a 2-man race between Jackson Acker, a Wisconsin product, and a guy named Ben Van Sumeran. And as of today, that race appears to be over. Let's talk about Ben Van Sumeran, because this man deserves a full introduction. He is a former Michigan State standout, a Big Ten athlete who was originally recruited as a running back before shifting to linebacker, and now in Buffalo he's carved out a role as a fullback. At 6'1", 240 pounds, and reportedly clocking a blazing 4 something in the 40-yard dash, This is not your grandfather's plotting straight-ahead fullback. This is a hybrid athlete, a converted linebacker with running back bloodlines, built like a tank but moving like a guy 15 pounds lighter. Injuries have slowed him down at points in his career, no doubt about that, but when healthy. Multiple people around the team have made it clear this man is dominating in camp. And here's the kicker that Bills fans should be extremely excited about. Van Sumeran isn't some unproven theoretical prospect. He's got NFL receipts. Before landing in Buffalo, he spent time with the Philadelphia Eagles, the same Eagles team that signed Saquon Barkley and watched him put together one of the most electric, record-breaking rushing seasons in recent memory. And guess who was on the field delivering some of the key blocks that helped spring those runs? Ben Van Sumeran. Watch the tape and you'll see him getting to the second level, locking up linebackers, creating exactly the kind of running lanes that turned Saquon into a superstar that season. Now picture that same skill set, that same second-level blocking ability, wearing a Buffalo uniform, clearing paths for an offense that already boasts the best rushing attack in the entire NFL. Because let's not forget, that's the offense Van Sumeran is stepping into. The Bills didn't just have a good rushing attack last year, they had the best one in football. And a huge, underappreciated piece of that success was Reggie Gilliam, the bruising fullback who set the tone in the trenches for years. Well, Gilliam is gone now, off to New England with the Patriots, which leaves a massive void at a position that might not show up much in the box score but shows up everywhere on the tape if you know where to look. So who fills that role? Based on everything we're seeing, the Jackson Acker release, the buzz out of training camp, the special teams contributions, the second-level blocking on tape, all signs are pointing directly at Ben Van Sumeran. He's not just contributing on offense either. He's been making noise on special teams too, delivering effective blocks and even racking up special teams tackles, the kind of do-it-all versatility that this Buffalo coaching staff clearly values. And here's a fun wrinkle. Because he came up as a linebacker, there's a real chance that if injuries hit the second level of Buffalo's defense later in the season, Van Sumeran could even be an option to slide over and help out there too. That's the kind of positional flexibility that makes a roster spot basically bulletproof. Now, is anyone else in the mix for that fullback job? A couple of names get floated, Ian Wheeler, Frank Gore Jr., but truthfully, neither of those guys has the prototypical size or blocking profile teams look for at fullback. This increasingly looks like a one-horse race, and Ben Van Sumeran appears to be the horse. Circle his name, Bills fans, because this might be one of the more underrated roster locks on the entire depth chart heading into the 2026 season. All right, let's pump the brakes on the fullback talk for a second, because there's plenty more happening around one Bills drive. Let's talk about the trenches, because Buffalo's defensive line might be building into something special. There's a rookie who's been turning heads with the way he absorbs double-team blocks, creates space for the linebackers behind him to fly downhill and make plays, and honestly, if what we saw on tape from preseason week 1 is any indication, this defensive front could be the best it's looked in a decade. That's not hyperbole, that's a real organic buzz building out of camp. Two names to circle as this preseason rolls on, Landon Jackson and TJ Sanders. Both of these guys are set to battle it out for rotational snaps up front, and last season, honestly, we didn't see a ton out of either of them. Both spent stretches on injured reserve, both had games where they weren't even active. But this offseason, Landon Jackson reportedly bulked up, and the expectation is he could carve out a role as a run stuffer while TJ Sanders looks more like a developing pass rush piece. If both of these guys take a step forward, Buffalo's front could go from good to genuinely scary, the kind of complementary rotational pieces that keep opposing offensive lines guessing on every single snap, in every single down and distance as the season wears on. And then there's the receiver room, where things are about to get very interesting. With Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer both in the mix for that third wide receiver role, expect the coaching staff to keep experimenting with combinations as preseason Week 2 and even Week 3 roll around. Who gets those starting caliber snaps? That battle is far from settled, and it's one of the more fascinating subplots to track heading toward the regular season, especially with a joint practice against the Browns on the horizon this week. Now let's talk injuries, because no preseason recap is complete without a trip to the medical tent, and thankfully the news out of Buffalo is mostly good. DJ Moore hauled in a big catch during the Panthers game but came away from it with what looked like a right ankle tweak. The good news? By all indications, Moore avoided anything catastrophic and should be just fine. Keon Coleman had a similar scare. He got a little nicked up on his ankle during a receiver snap and walked off the field, but again, the expectation is that he's going to be okay. In fact, offensive coordinator Joe Brady confirmed that both Moore and Coleman were fine, and that if this had been a real regular season game rather than a preseason tune-up, backup receiver Skylar Bell likely would have seen the field in their place. On the offensive line, Alec Anderson spent some time off the field, which opened the door for Austin Corbett to step in and log some quality snaps at left guard. That competition at left guard is still very much alive, and don't be shocked if Corbett ends up starting there when the Bills take on the Browns this upcoming weekend. Meanwhile, there's genuinely great news on the Connor McGovern front. He's expected to be back on the field within just a few weeks, which is a massive relief given how strong that Houston Texans defensive line is going to be when the regular season kicks off. Getting McGovern back healthy and ready for that Texans matchup could not be more important. A couple of other names to keep an eye on, Max Herdzlick and Cole Bishop were both seen doing pregame workouts and strength and conditioning work rather than suiting up for live snaps, which appears to be a precautionary move more than anything else. The likely read here is simple. If this had been a real game and not preseason, both guys probably would have played. But there's zero reason to rush anyone in August. Let the depth guys rack up reps, let the starters rest and recover, and get everybody peaking at the right time, because Houston is going to be one heck of a way to open the regular season. And finally, in case you needed one more reason to feel good about being a Bills fan today, Nielsen just dropped its very first ever NFL Fandom Index, ranking fan bases across the entire league. And Buffalo didn't just crack the top 5. Buffalo came in as the #1 city in the NFL. Apparel purchases, #1. Event attendance, #1. Linear TV viewership, streaming numbers, radio listenership, all #1. Is this a surprise to anyone who's actually been paying attention? Not even a little bit. But it's still validating to see the data confirm what we've known for years. There is no fan base in professional football that shows up, gears up, and tunes in quite like Buffalo does. So here's where we land. This is a football team that just posted arguably its sharpest preseason Week 1 performance in years. It's a football team that's quietly filling out its roster with intention, bringing back depth pieces like Otis Reese IV, cutting bait on Jackson Acker, and clearing a clean runway for Ben Van Sumeran to step into that critical fullback role behind the best rushing offense in the NFL. It's a defensive front that might be building into something special up front, with names like Landon Jackson and TJ Sanders pushing for rotational snaps. And it's a fan base that, according to the actual data now, is officially the most passionate, most engaged, most all-in fan base in the entire National Football League. Buffalo, the vibes are immaculate right now. Football is back, the team looks put together, and every single roster move, even the quiet ones, is pointing toward a Bills team that knows exactly who it wants to be heading into 2026. So here's what we need from you. If this breakdown got you even a little bit more hyped for the season, smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. Drop a comment and tell me your take. Is Ben Van Sumeran the guy at fullback, or do you think there's still a wild card out there we haven't talked about? And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because we are breaking down Bills news like this every single day, all the way through the regular season. Thanks for watching, my friends. God bless. Go Bills. We'll see you in the next one.